be some music, right?
All right, I'm going to keep that going. I'm not going to stop it as long as it's recording the video, but I'm also going to get out of my way there. There we go. All right, so it is recording.
Okay, so
And now I'm gonna
my
put this
question
over
is,
here.
are you going to play me
All of
some
the
of?
music I will have set up for you when the show airs. So we'll
Can
be
he
good
hear
to
us?
go. And I'll give
I
you the
don't know.
same signals just as before. Play a little bit of these songs underneath the programming. And
Richard,
it'll be a really nice program.
So Richard, what I want to do though is I want to play on the air now. I want to play a couple snippets if it's possible so that James can talk about the songs. Is it possible?
Yeah, as long as I know what the song, what it is that you want to play.
So the first one, you know, I definitely want to play the Rising of the Sea, the title track. You've got that.
All right, hang on one second. Let me hang on just a second here. I need to, what have I got here? Where the hell?
I don't.
Come it. Okay, I got to go look at the list here because what I've got here is I've got in the COVID times, Rising of the Sea, the Vast Infinity, Watch Line. Why do I have two versions of Watch Line?
I don't watch line doesn't sound right.
Well, it says James Caan, The Meaning of Life, singer, songwriter, et cetera, and the title says Watch Line.
Oh, I may have sent the wrong track then. That's from a different album.
I guess my question is, in the COVID times, Rising of the Sea, The Vast Infinity, are those three correct?
Those three, right?
Yep, that's what I want.
Very good. What about this one here that I just mentioned, Waterline?
Yeah, that's from a different album. You can play that if you like.
I might use that one going in and out or what have you, but I'll get these others. So Elizabeth, because I have to have a separate box open in order to play the ones that you want to play. And then we'll get started here. All right.
And although Waterline isn't a shanty, it has a ocean, seafaring kind of
and there we go.
Theme.
1, 2, and 3. Okay, so let me put this here. So here's what you can do, Elizabeth.
Yes.
You want to start with Rising of the Sea. And then if you can call for it, I will. I'll play it, and we'll be fine in that regard.
So just to confirm, the three you have.
There it is. Okay, so that'll work real well. So we'll start with Rising of the Sea. You just tell me when, and I'll play it, and then I'll bring it down. Oh, can I bring it down? Hang on a second. Hold. Okay. Hang on.
So
I got to do it differently. The logistics on this whole thing are starting to get a little complicated, but I can handle it. All right. Let's do this here.
Wait 1 second. So what are the three songs you have, Richard? You've got Rising of the Sea,
COVID Times,
right?
And what's it? In the Infinity?
The Vast Infinity.
The Vast Infinity.
Okay, that squares with what I want. That's perfect.
All right, so let me grab the right. Let's see, this is where I want here. This way you guys will be able to hear it. There. And now let me go over to this window over here.
If you want to play Waterline is just in and out tone transitioning, that's fine.
This one,
well,
this one, 2022, 2023, 25. Come on, you. Come. Let's see here. Give me, there we go. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And we're going to open these three and we'll play them from this computer. And
that's it.
We're going to talk about how Leah Thomas and Rachel Levine have tricked feminists into defending men. Is a member of the Project 21 National.
And what date does the album come out again? It's
April 4th.
The 4th. That's what I thought. Okay.
All right, I'll just play a little of this, make sure you guys can hear it.
Rising of the seas, by the rising of the seas.
That's good.
All right, very good. Let me put my earpiece in here. All right. Ow. I didn't want to do that. Okay, so I've got that set. Oh, Lord. Okay, I can't have that up until we need the music. So that'll be fine. That'll be fine. Okay. All right. So let me get back to the session that we'll record with, even though the video is going on right now, but that's just fine. And then we're going to do this 4. Okay, so we'll keep those 4 in there and then we'll go ahead and start here. You ready to go, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me mark it here. And I'll be ready with Rising of the Sea. We'll just use that one in the first segment, right?
Right.
Okay. All right, stand by in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Hello, 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 Santa Barbara. It's your chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. And I'm celebrating the release of a new album coming out called By the Rising of the Sea. And how this came to my attention was a great girlfriend of mine who is an artist sent me a video link to a music video called Rising of the Sea. And she said, this has won a bunch of awards. It's by a local guy. Do you know this guy? I didn't know this guy, but now I do. It's Dr. James Caan, and he's with us to talk to us a little bit about the album, but just a little background. So Dr. Caan has released a number of Americana music albums. There's a number of them. Waterline, The 12th Elf, Man Walks into a Bar, The Meaning of Life, and Matamoros. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but what caught my attention, and actually, didn't I, Dr. Caan, I sent it to the Nautical Museum here in town. I thought it was so interesting. Dr. Caan's been a fan for many years of sea shanties, and it's a special genre of music that, is based way back in time. For, I guess, people sang on boats forever. The famous sea shanties are from the 18th and the 19th century, I would think. And he writes to me that when his kids were young, and we'll get into this water theme in a minute, but when his kids were young, he would stand by the sink and wash the dishes, and the family would sing sea shanties together. And he happened to mention this historical tidbit to his producer, and he said, well, let's write an album of current sea shanties, and let's have it based not necessarily on struggles of the men at sea and the harpooning and the woman they left behind and this, the stresses of the ship life, but let's have it be about today's issues. Let's have it be about droughts and fires and floods and species die off and crop failures and, of course, rising seas. But what's so interesting is that Dr. Caan also got into really present day, almost humorous topics. Like there's a song that we'll discuss a little bit about COVID times, which is a sea shanty set to COVID times issues. So you get my drift. You get, I shouldn't have said that, but you get the effect of why this made a big impression on me, taking this old genre and adding these new poems and lyrics to this genre. And I have with us Dr. Caan, and his life is so interesting. We're going to get into that a little bit as well. Discussion of how he arrived where he arrived. But before we do that, I want to just introduce Dr. Caan, and then we're going to hear a little bit about one of my favorite tracks on this album. So Dr. Caan, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So what are we going to hear? Tell us a little bit about the background of The Rising of the Seas.
So this is the title song on the album, Rising of the Sea. And this was the first one I wrote when first coming up with the idea of doing shanties about contemporary crises. And climate change, seems like the biggest crisis we're confronting now. And it's certainly aggravating, if not the cause of many other crises. For example, one of the songs has issues about, a couple have issues about refugee crises, which is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And that's, the refugee crisis is for many reasons, like we see in Ukraine, it's from war or in Syria, but it also has climate change at its root. People are starving across great swaths of Africa. And, and lots of wars are caused by climate change, by the crop failures and social upheavals caused by climate change. So it seemed like really the elemental kind of issue to write about.
And just before we listen real quickly, where were you when you wrote this? What was going on in your life?
Well, it was the lockdown. I had been, I'd continued practicing medicine all the way up through March of 2020. And I've been thinking about retiring for a few years, but when the pandemic hit and the lockdown came, that seemed like it tipped me over the edge. So I stopped working. I'd been working at the Med Center, Urgent Care Center, for many years in Santa Barbara. And that was retiring in and of itself was a little bit disorienting for me. Something I had done my whole life. It was my organizing principle. So it was a little upending, and I wandered around trying to figure out what to do. My last big project had been over for about a year or so. Was writing a novel and another CD that I had just finished. So I started looking around for projects, and the lockdown was very isolating. I stopped seeing all my friends, like many of us did, and pretty much quarantined in the house for big swaths of it. So my wife, who's an artist, Jill Littlewood, and I agreed that we should think of this not as a horrific thing, this lockdown, but as an artist's retreat. And so we treated our house like, there's a great artist retreat that George O'Keeffe had in New Mexico. I can't remember what it was called now.
It's
Ghost Ranch. Ghost Ranch. So anyway, we both became finally very productive that year, that 2 years really. And this is one of the things that rose to the surface.
So Richard, do you have that song keyed up? Let's play a little. This is Rising of the Sea, and we're celebrating this album, and Dr. James Caan is with us, the progenitor.
The day may yet be lost, and the empty world tossed on the rising seas.
The temperature's rising, lads, degree by degree.
Woe betide us from the rising sea.
Come terrible migrations and a world of refugees,
all adrift on the rising sea. The rising of the seas, by the rising of the seas. The day may yet be lost, and the empty world tossed on the rising sea.
The icebergs all are calving, their cubs drifting on the floes,
well away on the rising sea.
And the landfalls are a-shrinking down to where nobody knows,
sinking low on the rising sea. The rising of the seas, by the rising of the seas. The day may yet be lost, and the empty world tossed on the rising seas.
Come hurricanes and river floods and ice storms, know it well,
by the rising of the sea.
And the furnace burning fuel sounds like the tolling of the bell,
the bell of the rising sea.
And the droughts of withered flowers that are twisting in the breeze,
far away from the rising seas.
In the wildfires we are losing all the forests for the trees,
to the winds of the rising seas.
And the birds
Richard.
without direction
Richard.
on the clear and arid plains.
Fade out for me, thank you. So that's a little sample, and I have to just say, dear listener, that the the music itself is beautiful, but you need to see the video that goes along with it. And if you go to YouTube and you Google Rising of the Sea, you'll see this beautiful video. And this video was what kind of hooked me to try to find Dr. Khan and talk to him about this album. It's won several awards at film festivals. It won the Best Music Video at the Global Film and Music Festival, for example. And it was selected as a finalist in the International Acoustic Music Awards Americana Folk category. And, you know, just, I realize we're on radio, but, you know, from the standpoint of my eye, you know, I've been appraising art for 30 plus years. So the composition is beautiful. So the picture plane is very flat. And of course, you've got this wonderful depth of field because, you know, it's the sea. And you noticed it was 4-part harmony. So the 4 gentlemen are kind of perched along the really large rocks together. And, you know, the color harmony is gray and white and sort of a blue tone. And the light is that light you only get, you know, at the ocean side. So it's a beautiful work of art in itself. Maybe Dr. Khan, could you talk to me a little bit about what the members of the group, you know, I could hear some really, you know, there's a beautiful bass voice. There's, you know,
Sure.
Who sings what? I'm interested to know.
Yeah. So the backup singer right behind me over my right shoulder in the video is David West, and he was the producer of the album. He's a local music producer who himself is a multi-instrumentalist who toured for many years with Cache Valley Drifters and Kate Wolf and Chris Hillman. And now he's settled out in Santa Barbara and he has a very small, wonderful boutique studio. And he sings bass. When instruments are required, he also plays guitar and mandolin and banjo and dobro and everything bass. So he's sort of an all-around utility player and a great guy. The very tall gentleman singing alto is Doug Clegg, and he's also a wonderful local singer-songwriter. And Tom Ball was the 4th person in the video. Tom is a great local and actually internationally known harmonica player. You can hear him every Sunday at Cold Springs Tavern playing for his lunch. And the accordion you hear is Brian Mann, who's a renowned accordion and piano player. He used to produce the Doobie Brothers before he came here. And the photographer that you like the photography so much is Ethan Turpin. And he's a local artist. He also does a lot of videography for the Forestry Service and their fire prevention and forest fire videos.
It's a beautiful piece, and you know, we can hear the music there. And I was to say, dear listener, check out YouTube and see if you can see Rising of the Sea, the video. It's well worth your time. It's just gorgeous. And Richard's giving us a sign. We got to go to quick break. Just reintroducing, I'm speaking with Dr. James Kahn. When we get back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about his, I think, incredible life. And his belief in the power of the possible. How can I say it better, Dr. Kahn? We'll talk a little bit about that when we get back from the break. Hey, Richard.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Let's go to quick break. And I know when you'll be hearing this show, Richard is going to be going in and out with the selection called Waterline, which is from a previous album by Dr. Kahn. So it's part of his oeuvre, but what we're specifically celebrating today is the release of the new album, Rising of the Sea, on April 4th. Don't turn that dial back with Dr. Kahn in a minute.
All right, very good, very good. And thank you for telling me what I'll be playing here. That's good. By the way, I was just remembering an artist. He was one of my he is one of my favorite artists. His name is Dan Fogelberg. And he has 3 songs that I just I've listened to him over and over again. One of them is called Song of the Sea. The other one is called The Minstrel, which I believe is probably about I think that was the name of his sailboat. I'm watching the video and it's him. But the one that I really thought of that would apply as a sea shanty would be called The Reach.
Don't know that one.
And then there's one by Harry Chapin referring to the Wailers,
Mhm.
and the song is called Dogtown. Basically, the Wailers go out, onto the lake, the big lake, Lake Erie or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and they get caught in the storms of November and so on and so forth, and they all drowned.
Yeah.
And the women are usually left with the
Right.
dog,
Sure.
So, but very, very interesting stuff. And of course, John Denver has one too called The Winds of November.
Uh-huh.
So it's really good. Which song do you want to come back with, or that you want to feature in the next?
Yeah, I think COVID times would be good, because I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Khan's professional
Good
background.
old COVID times. Okay. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart. I'm talking with Dr. James Khan, celebrating the release of a new album by him called By the Rising of the Sea. It comes out April 4th. And Dr. Khan, if folks want to pick that up, what's the best place to get it?
Yeah, all the usual places: Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, Pandora.
Okay. And then, the what I teased my listeners with was that
There's
Dr.
also, by the
Khan's-
way, you can get copies at Chaucer's bookstore as well.
Okay.
Locally.
Dr. Khan's remarkable life, and we were talking about, I like to say in situations and with folks like Dr. Khan, it's an exercise and an example of the art of the possible. And just a little background, he's a career ER physician. And while he was in medical school, astoundingly, he found the time to write science fiction books. And he started that as a hobby. And that grew through his career. And he wrote some good ones: World Enough in Time, Time's Dark Laughter, Timefall, published by Del Rey Books. And then here's the really cool thing. He was, like saying, ER physician. He got a phone call from a woman who said, would you give me some pointers about resuscitating an alien? And, instead of thinking this is a crank call, art of the possible, well, sure. Anyway, turns out she was one of the runners for Steven Spielberg's E.T. And it turns out that, Dr. Khan helped with that film. And what did he do on the film? Not only was he in the film for a short bit, but he counseled on how something with the head and a windpipe and a body like E.T. had, if you remember, how he could be resuscitated on the table. And Dr. Khan was telling me this story that here is this thing on the table. And he was told by Spielberg, just do what you normally do. And he and his team of other ER doctors who do resuscitated. So that's the clip you'll see in E.T. Well, that led Dr. Khan down the road of many interesting projects in Hollywood, and we'll talk about that. He novelized, which is a way of narrating the movie in book form. He novelized E.T., Poltergeist. He novelized Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Goonies, as well as The Return of the Jedi. So, I couldn't wrap my head around reading that, Dr. Khan. It's so remarkable. Can you talk a little bit about what was it like to work with Lucas and Spielberg? And I guess the comment that I would have is they trusted you to do something incredible with their story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty amazing working with them. I have to correct you a little bit, though. I did not write the novelization for E.T. I was in that scene saving E.T.'s life, and I and the other doctors and nurses all contributed ad lib to all the dialogue in that scene. we just talked to each other and shouted out the things we would normally do in resuscitation because Spielberg wanted it to sound real. But the rest of them I did novelize. And that's how I got started into novelizations. I gave Spielberg a copy of my first science fiction novel and asked him to, I can't believe the gall I had, but I asked him if he wanted to make a movie of it. And he said no, but he read it and he liked it enough that he gave me the assignment to write the novelization of Poltergeist, as long as I could write it in a month. So he said, can you? And I had this moment of terror because I didn't know what a novelization was. And I knew that I was scheduled to work in the emergency room, every week over the next month. But I said, yes, I'll do it. I can do it. So I got all my doctor friends to cover all my shifts that month and spent the whole month from 9 in the morning to 9 or 10 every night, 7 days a week in his office at MGM writing it. And I didn't have, while I was writing it, I didn't have that much more contact with him. If I had questions about the writing, sometimes I would talk to him, sometimes to his producer, Frank Marshall. But he was such a relaxed young guy. It had the whole feeling of being like a college fraternity on the set. All of his aides and producers were as young as he was. And, I asked him at one point after I'd finished the first draft, if I could add a lot of new material in the second draft that wasn't in the script of the movie at all. And, he had liked what I had written so far well enough that he said, sure, go ahead, write whatever you want. So it was very cool about the whole thing. George Lucas was quite different. He was also a really nice guy, but much more reserved. And I got the feeling almost overwhelmed at his own success. There was a certain sense of just too many questions he had to answer every moment. And I went up to visit him when I got the assignment to write Return of the Jedi. And I asked him, like I had with Spielberg, I gave him a copy of my science fiction book and asked if he would consider making a movie of it. So he said, yeah, follow me. So he took me into an adjacent room that was about 20 by 20 feet, and it had bookshelves on every wall and desks and chairs, and every shelf and every table and every floor space was piled high with scripts and books. And he said, okay, well, that pile is ones my agent sent me. And that one is the ones my manager sent. Those are the ones that my wife gave me from her friends. These are the ones from my old college friends. These are the ones from actors that I met on the set. Why don't you put your book right on this pile and I'll get to it as soon as I can. And I don't think he was being mean. I think he was just giving me a little window into his day, what his life was like.
Fascinating. And I want to talk a little bit about, your career in television. Multiple episodes of William Shatner's Tech War, and then Xena, the Warrior Princess.
Yeah, that's the one that gave me most cred with my kids.
Really?
Yeah.
And are your kids male or female or both?
They're both. They're all grown now. My daughter's almost 40. My youngest son is about 25, 26.
And then can you tell me that you nominated for a writing Emmy on All My Children?
Yeah, that was sort of late in my career. I started out after doing novelizations. I actually had to turn down a novelization because I was starting to get typecast as a novelizer. And I wanted to do other things. I wanted to expand. I was trying to sell my scripts for screenplays. So I turned one down. I had just gotten a job as the head writer on a TV show called Family Medical Center. And that led me to other TV shows. Initially I really wanted to make movies, but my agent at that time told me, you know what, movies are a hobby, television is a career. You want to be working all the time and making a living to support your family, get TV jobs. So I took his advice and I just followed all my jobs to their next level up. Each one took me a little higher in the food chain. After that, I got onto Melrose Place. I ended up being a writer-producer on Melrose Place for several years. I was on Star Trek Voyager. And then after Star Trek Voyager, one of the producers, Chuck Pratt from Melrose Place, got a job head writing All My Children. So he asked me if I'd come back for a year or two. And so that's where I got the nomination.
How is that different? how is that writing style? How is that different from, say, science fiction?
Melrose Place. It's very different. And I was was another time that I said, yes, I can do it. I'll do it. And just did it, even though I had no idea if I could write soap operas or not. It's been sort of a recurring theme in my life to be presented to something that I kind of wanted to do, but it was kind of scary and I'd never done it before. And I would jump, I would make that leap. It's like I said earlier, as someone once told me, it's like jumping off a cliff and building your wings as you fall.
Amazing quote. And, I have to say, just the trajectory, the thing that gets me is so many of us are scared when we open a new door or somebody's opened a door and shoved us in. And so many of us say, no, I can't do that. And they don't go forward. They kind of stay.
I mean, I was terrified. I was terrified approaching Spielberg with my book and, sort of hat in hand and asking if this big, huge Hollywood producer would consider possibly, using my book, and so I went back and forth and I finally thought, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? He would say no, and then I was back where I was already the day before. So what's the big deal?
Wonderful, wonderful way to approach a challenge, for sure. Richard, giving us the sign we have to go to a quick break. Just to reintroduce, I'm speaking with Dr. James Caan as we're learning, multifaceted, creative individual. So his main career is a doctor. Another main career is he's a writer for Hollywood and TV. And now we're learning that he's a musician with many albums to his credit, award-winning collaborations with music video. And so this is another chapter altogether. The arc is all in the creative life, but I mentioned to Dr. Caan that one kind of connecting arc was space and water, and I'm going to add a third component. So there's a lot of space, science fiction, E.T., Boulder, there's a lot of space, sci-fi, there's a lot of water imagery, the inception of the sea shanties being around the sink in the kitchen. And then there's this wonderful thing that I pick up on is this concept of the trust that you engendered in people. And maybe when we get back from the break, you could talk about those three, I don't know, why are they icons? Well, trust isn't an icon. I suppose it could be. Hey, Richard.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Let's go to quick break. Back with Dr. Caan, just a minute.
All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I'm celebrating, well, I guess more than just the album release, because we're getting into some of the wonderful things in Dr. Caan's life. But James Caan is releasing By the Rising of the Sea, a collection of original sea shanties concerning modern day dilemmas, such dilemmas as the COVID crisis. And Richard, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to play a little bit of the COVID song. The COVID crisis, the species die-off, the refugee crisis, and global pollution, not the least of which is climate change. And, we talked a little bit about some of the issues that figure strongly, the sea and space, and this idea of trust. And then there's this kind of humor that you feel, almost a dark humor in the song. Hey, Richard, let's listen a little bit of COVID times.
I remember 2020 so well, when the fucking world ran out of luck and the hinges broke on the gates of hell. Was the year that COVID ran amok. Was a year of fucking masks and lies and families broke and children's cries. You talk to your friends across a screen, you try to reach out, then another one dies. They died so fast the bodies spilled from an old refrigeration truck. We never knew all the souls got killed in the year the fucker ran amok.
I love it. I absolutely love it. It's fantastic. So, okay, take us back. You wrote that, you know, and what was obviously what the inspiration was,
Yes.
right? So, you know,
Toward the
you're
end of 2020, we'd been in lockdown for a year almost. And just all the things that had happened that year was just weighing everybody down. Everyone was going crazy with not knowing which way to turn or how to assimilate all these different things, the pandemic, the riots, the George Floyd thing. It was like every refugee crises. And it was just, you know, one way I have to get my anxieties and stresses out is through the creative processes, through writing songs or stories. So that's what I did.
it's fantastic. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about this, you know, the archetypes that figure strongly the sea, the ocean, water, space.
Well, the science fiction aspect, I was a science fiction lover from my early childhood. And in fact, that was when I started writing. I can remember being around 8 or 9 years old, and I would read these science fiction comic books and amazing stories and tales from the crypt, horror, fantasy, science fiction. And I would read them, but there would be some plot twist in them that I would think of a different plot twist. And I thought I could write it better, write something different. So in my little, you know, 9-year-old scrawl in my notebook, I would write the whole comic book story out, but make the changes that I wanted to see in it. It's like, that was probably my first novelization, but that was the beginning of my love with, you know, with sci-fi and all that. Science fiction movies from the 50s I used to love, you know.
And I wanted to follow up on something that you mentioned to me, which is that the movie Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that there was a connection with the research that you had done in medical school into extrasensory perception.
Right.
I'd love to hear. Tell me more.
I worked at the sleep lab at the University of Chicago for the year before, and then the first year of medical school. And I can't get into the details of the research; it's too complicated. But basically, I would hypnotize two people and see if there was any transmission of ideas or feelings or thoughts between them. I won't go into the methodology, but it was pretty impressive. We got some actual positive results. Everyone in the lab was very surprised. We did it because we got a grant to do it, and I was the youngest person in the lab, and they assigned me to do it. So I did it, and everyone was kind of shocked that we saw some positive things. But I'd always kept that with me. At some point, someday, I'll tell you all the details of the study if you're interested. But when I was writing Poltergeist, and as I mentioned, after the first draft, I asked Stephen if I could add my own material, and he said, sure. Then I brought in all this material from my research into the novel of Poltergeist and attributed it to the scientists, the paranormal scientists who were in the house of the people who were having the poltergeist experience.
I mean, that must have been fascinating to bring that research into it, and
yeah, it was great fun. It was great fun. And I have to tell you, this one amazing thing that happened during the writing of it. I just remembered this was that it was November of '81, and I was almost done writing. I had only a couple days left, so it was right around Thanksgiving of '81, and I was in there late at night. It was around 9 o'clock at night. It was the only person in the building, except I had been given a secretary to transcribe my writing. I wrote in longhand in those days. So every 4 or 5 pages, I would give her the pages and she would type it up on her IBM Selectric typewriter. So right around 9 o'clock, I was writing a section that was really scaring me. I did that a few times in the book. I would scare myself. And I wrote the line, thunder and lightning ripped the sky. And literally moments after I wrote it, and it had not been raining or thundering or lightning at all day. The moment I wrote it, this lightning bolt and this crash of thunder, louder than anything I'd ever heard, hit the building, and all the lights in the building went out. And it was a room full of video games, old console video games like Missile Command and Donkey Kong. And so they all went out as well. And then about 20 seconds, and the secretary in the other room screamed and jumped up and said, "What's happening?" About 15 or 20 seconds later, all the lights went on again and all the video games went on and started playing themselves.
Right out, yeah.
So that was
right
my
out.
poltergeist experience.
Yeah, right out. That's amazing. So you were pulling down that energy, and that
Yeah.
energy, yeah, there it was. Richard's giving us a sign. We got to go to a quick break.
Okay.
Yeah, when we get back from the break, I want to talk about some of the things that you're working on now. It occurred to me that, you're the kind of man where a new adventure is always in store. So I'm curious to know what that new adventure might look like
Sure.
when we get back from the break. Hey, Richard,
Yes, Elizabeth.
let's go to a quick break. And oh, by the way, when we come back, Richard, I'd like to play a little bit of Vast Infinity, which is another song on the album. And we are celebrating Dr. Khan's release of his new album, By the Rising of the Sea. And that's due to come out April 4th, available on all the usual platforms. And it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I've listened to the whole album, and it's just a beautiful piece of work. Hey, Richard, let's go to a quick break. Back in a minute with Dr. Khan.
Okay, and here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I'm speaking with Dr. James Khan. And we're celebrating the release of a new album called By the Rising of the Sea by Dr. Khan. And we're also talking a little bit about the life creative, because that's kind of a big theme here. And just a little background. I asked my question on the back of scant knowledge, but enough knowledge to indicate to me that I know perhaps there's a new adventure brewing. I mean, this is Dr. Khan, emergency room doctor, happened to take a challenge of how to resuscitate an alien, became involved with Spielberg's E.T., went on to work with Lucas, novelized wonderful, iconic movies, many of which everybody knows, E.T., Poltergeist, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Goonies, and The Return of the Jedi. Then went on to a career in TV as a writer. And then, here we know him in Santa Barbara for two things. He's a musician and a doctor, but we also know him for being the co-founder of the Community Film Studio of Santa Barbara. And that was a big adventure. And as a matter of fact, must have been, was it like 12 years ago, it started to come up on the radar that you guys were doing something with a film studio for anybody who was interested in learning about film. Come to find out that a film called The Bet won Best Feature at the LA Film Festival in 2013. So some wonderful things and some young talent, by the way, have come out of the Community Film Studio. But so now we know that this is a person that likes to try different challenges. So may I be so bold as to ask what's next, Dr. Khan?
Yeah, actually, I mentioned a novel that I had written just prior to this album. It's called Matamoros. And it was about a piece of unknown American history during the Civil War. Matamoros, Mexico, right across the river from Brownsville, Texas, was the city where the Confederacy smuggled all its cotton out to England and smuggled all its guns in so it could fight the Civil War. So it was a town full of Yankee and rebel spies and gun runners and runaway slaves, but also Napoleon had just invaded Mexico. So there were French foreign legionnaires there. It was very much a Casablanca kind of town. So I researched it very deeply for 4 or 5 years and wrote the novel. It took me a couple years to write the novel. And while I wrote the novel, I was also writing a CD in which each song in the CD was about one of the characters in the novel. Again, Americana kind of folk songs. So those both came out in 2020. And that's, then I tend to have a fallow period after a big project like that. So, and that's when the lockdown came and I was a little depressed and disoriented after retiring. So I didn't do anything for a few months until I got involved with this sea shanty album. But now I say that all because the next project I've started working on is writing a pilot screenplay for Matamoros to try and turn it into a TV series. So,
Oh, can't wait for that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And it would be Napoleon III, right?
correct, correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to play a little bit of a song, Vast Infinity. And I went through the album and picked some of the songs that I really, really liked. And this has a real call to me. Richard, can we play just a few minutes? Do we have enough time? Yeah. Okay. Let's play a little Vast Infinity. Again, this is James Caan and his new release, new album, By the Rising of the Sea. And this is one of the tracks, Vast Infinity.
Set sail of a windy morn, felt kind of like being born with a lively life unrolling in front of me. We was born into a time short of reason, that's why I'm staying true to that vast infinity. So rise, children, rise, won't you rise to the very day, and never you mind the size of the hell gets in your way. Just say your goodbyes for the final come what may. I faced many a stormy sea, nearly got the best of me for all the damage laid by all them damaged souls. But I fear that never I done save the soul of anyone, so I just give myself to that vast infinity. Now rise, children, rise, won't you rise to the very day.
Wonderful. And, watching this, there's, company, you've got a spoon player.
It's not a spoon player. I asked my producer, David West, if he could find a spoon player. And he said, I'll do you one better. I've got a bones player. So this is a woman who lives in Ojai, Sharon Termont, and she plays the bones. And they're actual Irish cattle rib bones. And she whacks them against her hands, and she was great. So I really like this song too. This is one of the most up songs on the album, and it's really, some of them are kind of dark and gloomy about the fate of the world, but this one was really very upbeat about putting your faith in fate and in the world.
And the vast infinity,
the vast infinity, yeah. And in
Yeah.
the video that I did for this, in addition to the bones player, I found a wonderful Irish step dancer and a local tap dancer, and we filmed them doing Irish step dancing and tap dancing to this. So they led that percussive kind of tapping sound to the bones, and it was really cool.
So when you're involved in doing that, is you're writing the song and you're writing the lyrics, and then David is helping you with some of these, let's do bones and tap dance.
Right. And if instruments are required, I play the guitar on many of these, but if any other instruments are required, then he'll suggest one or the other, and we'll talk about what would be good going with it.
Yeah, and so that I just wanted to just end with a comment that a lot of people would listen to this and say, how did Dr. Caan get into the fold? The Spielbergs, the Lucases, the great talents, and even you're mentioning, some of the talents that you used for the albums. What do people? I guess I'm looking for that word trust. Do you think that when you were a doctor, or since you are a doctor, you had to develop a certain rapport or level of trust?
No, absolutely, that's part of it. I mean, people say, "Oh, it's who you know in Hollywood to get anywhere," and
but you didn't know anybody.
I know, but what did happen to me, and what happens to many people, is there's an initial moment of being in the right place at the right time, and that happened to me. But then you have to be able to take advantage of it, and you have to have the chops to do the writing, and as you say, I think you have to be trustworthy, and you have to be able to transmit a sense of trustworthiness to the people who are holding out their hand and saying, can you do this? Can I trust you to do this?
Well, just one more shout out, dear listener, you pick up this album, Rising of the Sea, coming out April the 4th on all the platforms. It's a real treat. And, you know, it's quite an interesting reflection because, you know, the era that we've just lived through the last 2 years, we look back and we look forward at the same time. And this album that was produced during that time, written during that time, kind of capsulizes both the, you know, the backwards look in the genre and the forward look in the lyrics and the narrative structure of these songs. So it's really, I mean, I was really taken by it, Dr. I really,
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
yeah.
that.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Sure, my pleasure. This is really a nice talk. Thank you. And thank you, Richard, for producing it.
All right, we're clear. Oh, well, you're very welcome. I had a good time. As great. The song about COVID, I don't know what chord that was, but it works really well.
Oh,
Man.
it's an E minor.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
I could